Certainly roofing paper is not a bad idea. I think it has its benefits. I don't really do it much anymore, but it does allow the sunlight to be absorbed in the black and help the hive walls get a little bit warmer in late winter. So it's not a bad idea. I think it also cuts down on wind drafts. If your equipment has some leaks around it, some old equipment may be broken and allowing cold air in, it can help that way as well. Well, again, when I use bad insulation on my colonies, they thrive, they do well, but they don't do any better than the ones that I don't wrap. The ones that I don't wrap do just as fine. And remember, it's what I do to the colony in preparing it for winter, not necessarily the outside. However, I will say this. If for some reason your colony is suffering from very low population, you can't get it up to 40,000, maybe they're not as healthy as they need to be, well, if you shield them from a harsh winter with some of this wrap, it could, I'm not saying it's the way to go, but it could benefit your colony and getting them to a warmer place like in the spring. So it would be like me and you if we had the flu, if we were sick, if we drank plenty of fluids and kept a blanket on, didn't go expose ourselves to the outside elements, we would probably recover quicker. So only if you're I don't use this method. Like, I don't want you to say, okay, I don't want to treat for mites, I don't want to deal with mites, I don't want to feed my bees, I'll just throw wrapping paper around them, insulation around them, and they'll get through the winter and I won't have to do anything. See, we are a population that loves to take the simple way out. Well, getting your bees through the winter is not an easy thing to do. You have to go about doing things with your colony in the summer and in the fall to get them strong enough to get through the winter. So don't just try to throw something together at the last second on November the 1st, wrap them and keep your fingers crossed. That's not the right approach. But wrapping can help at times when bees are suffering from low populations that you just couldn't do anything about, though you tried, or if they're suffering from some sort of population number or illness that might help them make it to spring. There's a lot of types of insulation that I studied, a lot of types of different hives that I looked into. The hives that are kind of made out of the polyethylene, which is sort of like the styrofoam, only it's a little thicker. And what I read in some of the research that was done is that some of these hives actually develop a lot of moisture on the inside because wood can absorb some of that moisture where this polythyrene really can't. So it can be a problem with moisture because there's not much of a barrier to absorb this moisture like you see in wooden hives. I like to build foam boards. I like to, actually, I've got one bee that's circling me, right? But I like to build insulation out of these foam boards. You can get them all thicknesses, and let me show you how to do that. So the first thing you want to do is kind of think about the size that you're going to cut your foam board. I've already cut this foam board 23.5 inches, which is about what I need right here and to actually fit between my stand and to reach right about to the bottom of my top cover. So that's going to put me 23.5 inches. That's going to be a lot different if you have 2 deeps. Then you'll want to measure that. If you have 3 supers that you want to overwinter with, you'll have to compensate for that. Bees are really flighty right now on the goldenrod, so they're all around us. So I've already cut this to 23.5 for the height. So what we're looking at is the height. Now I want to think about how wide to cut it, and I need to let it overlay at least a ½ inch. So it looks like this one's going to be about 18 inches across. Did you get stung or just the black bugs?
I think it's a black bug.
Those little black bugs are really bad. Okay, so 18 inches is my mark. So I'm going to come over here. Got my little marker. Okay, so we'll put a mark at 18 inches here. Doesn't have to be exact rocket science, but in the ballpark. I just got a board to use as a straight line here, and that's 18 inches. Now, because I'm going to use this, I don't want to cut it or else I'll have a separate piece. I want to keep this as one piece that has hinges on it. So all I have to do is kind of score, just barely cut into the foam, maybe halfway through. And that way, when I fold it, it kind of stays together like that. Okay, so if we did everything like we had hoped, then this box should be pretty close to what we want. Like I said, it's just going to go around the hive now, so let's see how it did. And it's fine to do this while the bees are having a good day. They're just going in and out. In Illinois, it's so windy that we have to kind of duct tape anything like this, or else it'll blow away. So that's kind of a neat way to kind of wrap your hive up for winter if you want to put a little foam wrap around it. Another method that some people use to wrap their hive is, I won't mention the name brand, but it's kind of like insulation in a bag. Now, in my research that I found other people writing about this that studied it, they found that on a warm day in winter, it really hurt the colony because the warm sunlight could not reach the walls of the outside of the hive and actually provide a little bit of warmth. It was actually reverse insulation, working negatively. So if you want to use those bags of insulation, then you might want to consider taking them off on a warm winter day and letting the sunlight warm up that hive, break cluster, get into some honey, and put them back on if you consider it to be effective that way. But leaving them on a nice warm winter day kind of has a negative effect. All in all, wind block is one of the most practical ways to really help your bees make it through the winter. Just like your home, your furnace has to run a lot more on a warm winter day than it does on a cold winter day when it's not windy. So wind can pull heat out of the hive. So any kind of wind block that you can establish around your hive can be really beneficial. You might be creative, but you do need to keep the wind block about a foot or two away from the hive. Like, don't throw bales of straw or hay right against the hive, because that attracts a lot of moisture, and that's too much moisture around your colony. Let's talk about some overwintering techniques that we've put under the category of tools, tricks, and tips. Well, obviously you need a mouse guard. Mice love to run into your hive in the fall when they start harvesting corn and beans. If you live in row crop area, those mice are going to want to come into your colony and overwinter with your bees, and they'll sit there and eat your bees and eat the honey, and it can be really devastating. So you need to keep the mice out before they're looking for a winter home. So before you have your first frost, or before they harvest their fields around you, be sure and put your mouse reducers on. There's a lot of different kind of entrance reducers that will keep mice out. There are those that are metal that have little holes in them. The hives that we sell come with wooden entrance reducers, and usually the smallest entrance is enough. It's a 3/4 by 3/8 of an inch, I think, but it certainly reduces the opportunity for mites to come into your hive. Also consider, though, that if you use my Winter Be Kind, the way that I like to go through the winter is this. I put a Winter Be Kind candy board on top. Then I wrap my hive in bat insulation. My hives are actually on stands that are about a foot off the ground, screen bottom board, so I take my bat insulation all the way around the hive to the ground. And so there's no way bees are going to go in and out of the entrance because I've blocked that off with insulation. And so bees are going to be going in and out only through the top, which means a mouse is not going to be able to climb up the wall of my hive and go in that little hole at the top that I have on my Winter Be Kind. So for me, I deal with mites by not having that lower entrance. Those of you up north in a very snowy area, that is a blessing for you, because now your bees, you used to have to go out there and open up the entrance so your bees could get in and out. If it warmed up, the snow covered your entrance. Well, now you don't care, because your entrance is, 3 foot up on the top of your hive. And that is a great thing to do. Heating lamps. There are some people that use heating lamps. I've seen people talk about it on the internet. They'll put a bunch of nooks together and put a thermostat, a timer, or whatever on heating lamps. I don't like that idea. I need to produce bees. I need to raise bees that can survive the winter. I need to put my skills to work on managing my hives so they survive the winter, not rely on electricity or other things to get my bees through the winter. Can it help? Well, certainly it can. But it's pretty risky, because if you get the temperature wrong, the bees think it's really warm outside and they can attempt to fly in when it's too cold. So it's kind of tricky work. And I just don't even think, I would never suggest that that's something that you pursue, especially if you're a brand new beekeeper and you're wanting to use a heating lamp to get your bees through the winter. No, don't do that. Now, if you're a long-time beekeeper, you have a lot of experience, and you're wanting to experiment with other options, by all means experiment. That's how that smoker was invented. That's how Reverend Langstroth invented the hives you see behind me, through invention, through trying things. So by all means, if you're an experienced beekeeper and you're already utilizing some of these techniques that are practical management skills of the colony, then certainly try these other methods like a heating lamp. Just don't electrocute yourself. Let's talk about moving hives indoors. Is that a possibility? Yes, a lot of northern beekeepers way up north, Canada, they do actually have warehouses where they take their colonies in and work under red lights, since bees don't see red. And they actually will overwinter their colonies in warehouses away from the harsh winter of Canada, for example. Now, keep in mind that perfect setting is this. The temperature has to be around 35 to 40 degrees all the time they're stowed away, and it needs to be in a perfectly dark area. And so you can't put them in a garage that's going to get to be 60 degrees on a mild winter day. You can't put them down in your basement where it may get up to 55 degrees. They may break cluster and want to fly out of the box and fill up your house. So there's a lot of sensitive temperature control that has to be accomplished, as well as humidity. I've done it a few times, and it was very challenging for me to keep. I had about 50 nooks in a room, and I was running an air conditioner in that room all winter long, and I could not keep that room cool. It was just impossible. So, it takes a lot of electricity, compressors to keep a house cool in the summertime, and that's only keeping it about 72 degrees. Think about a refrigerator. You're having to keep a room the temperature of a refrigerator, and that's going to be very expensive, not only for the equipment, but for the energy bill. So be smart about that. Is it just not going to be practical for you to build a building and make a room refrigerated and pay that electric bill to keep 200 hives alive? 200 hives, it'd be cheaper to buy 200 new hives next year than it would be to run that refrigeration room all winter long. So you might think it's going to work, but there's a lot of things to think about. But again, it has to be kept between 30 and 40 degrees. That's the best temperature when bees are the calmest. They're consuming the least amount of food, and they can just sit in there and kind of overwinter at about 30 to 40 degrees. I want to mention something about doubled walled hives. I read about this while I was researching and preparing for this class, and I believe even the Reverend Langstroth and others in his day tried the double walled hives. And that's basically, they were probably using real 1-inch hives. Back then we now use 3/4 inch lumber, but if they were using 1-inch lumber, they were making a 2-inch thickness of wood from two planks of wood that were 1 inch. So it'd be like having a deep hive body that's 1 inch thick, and then attaching another hive body, pieces of wood on the outside of that, making it 2 inches. The reason why this is then and now it's not very productive is because It's more expensive. Already people are trying the least expensive way to get into beekeeping. And that's going to double the price if you double the lumber. It's going to double the shipping if you double the weight of the lumber. Also, it's going to be one of those things where nothing fits. If you make a double-walled hive, the measurements are wrong, the top covers all have to be that size, bottom boards have to be that size, queen excluders have to be that size for 2 walls. It changes everything, and all the people that make the accessories for a beehive, like the queen excluders, top covers, inner covers, all these things, they're not going to accommodate and change all their settings in order to make their accessories fit a double-walled hive. The concept is good. The concept is simulating what a tree is. Most trees are at least 2 to 6 inches thick that have holes in the middle. Still, the tree is pretty thick, and it does give more of a thickness of hive walls in their natural habitat. So the theory is really good. But again, the 3/4 inch hives that we use and have used for years are more than enough, because again, bees don't heat the inside of their colony, inside of the hive. They only heat in relationship to standing next to other bees and staying warm. So no matter how big of an area you give them, no matter how thick the walls are, they need to cluster to stay warm. Sometimes people ask me about top bar hives. How well do top bar hives overwinter? I have ran top bar hives. They were really trendy 5 years ago. We actually made them and sold them, and it was impossible for me to overwinter a colony in a top bar hive. And here's the struggle that I had. Now, you may be different. You may have all the techniques worked out. You may want to do it, and certainly you can experiment with ways to be successful. People have been successful overwintering top bars. My struggle was this. In nature, bees build their comb like this, vertically, right? And so if you have 2 deep hive bodies and a honey super and a winter bee kind, the cluster can all move without having to go around the frames. They can go between the frames and up into the honey, like the image I showed you of the tree. In a top bar hive, where the hive is really more of a horizontal hive, that means the frames all go like this, and the brood might be here and the honey over here. Well, the bees have to come out of the frames and go back up into the frames to move, out of the frames and into the frame. And that's a lot of movement. So my experience was my bees were dying without moving back into the top bar hive where the honey was. They were staying up in the brood area and dying. I do think that it's better to take the legs off of them, keep them lower to the ground, away from those strong winds if they're in a windy climate. You've got to find a way to provide a little bit of top insulation. Some people would put insulation between the top of the bar of the frame and the lid to keep the heat from just dispersing out. Top bar frames came from warmer climates. They were something that were noticed in, I think they first originated in Turkey maybe, but you see them more like in a warmer climate where bees make hives in large branches like this, and they will get in and make a hive inside of a large branch, but that's where it never gets cold. So they don't really have to worry about moving into the honey during the winter time. So I'm not trying to poo-poo the top bar hive industry, but I am saying that if you overwinter in top bar hives, you've got your work cut out for you, because it is a horizontal hive and it's not the natural way that bees move into the honey during the winter. It's a natural way for bees to go year-round where it's a warm climate. Thanks so much for this online course you've taken with me on getting your bees through the winter. I did provide a worksheet for you. If you would like a certificate of completion that I can sign and send, and you can hang it on your wall and be proud of the work that you put into this class, I'll be happy to do that. It's sort of like a little test that you fill out showing me that you went through the course and answered the questions. And then once I see that, you mail it back to me and I see that you did that, we'll send you out an autographed copy of a certificate saying you completed this course. and we appreciate you doing that. If you don't want to do that, you don't want the certificate, you can just use the worksheet as information for your personal use. But again, thank you. Be sure and check out my other online courses. I've got courses on basic beekeeping, queen rearing, how to raise queens, spring and swarm management, pests and diseases, and of course, a day in the apiary with David. So thanks again. I'll see you next time. Remember, it's going to be loud. Don't panic. Just stay real still.